Commander Jal stood on the bridge of his warship and watched another battle unfold in the cold darkness of space. His forearms worked across different control panels with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Outside the reinforced windows, energy beams crossed the void like deadly ribbons of light. Ships exploded in silent bursts of fire and metal. This was the Crindex Expanse, and this battle had been going on for 3 months now. 3 months of the same movements, the same tactics, the same results. The collective forces would push forward. The Dominion would push back, and at the end of each day, nothing would change. Jal had lived for 107 years, and he had spent every single one of those years in this war. The war between the collective and the Dominion had lasted for 847 years. Jal's grandfather had fought in this war. His father had died in this war. Now Jal commanded a heavy cruiser and watched young soldiers make the same mistakes their ancestors had made centuries ago. The war had become a way of life for both sides. Entire generations were born, lived, and died knowing nothing but endless conflict. "Commander, the Dominion fleet is repositioning," said his tactical officer, a thin reptilian creature named Sisk. "They're forming defensive pattern 7. Jal's mandibles clicked together in frustration. Pattern 7? Of course it was pattern 7. The Dominion always used pattern 7 when they held the center position near a gas giant. The collective would respond with formation 12. The Dominion would counter with maneuver 4, and they would dance this deadly dance for another week before both sides retreated to resupply. "Prepare formation 12, Jal ordered. Around him, his crew moved with tired efficiency. They knew the patterns too. The collective was a federation of 15 different species united by common ideals of freedom and cooperation. They had good ships, powerful weapons, and sophisticated artificial intelligence systems. The Dominion was an empire of 8 conquered species, ruled by the iron fist of the sovereign caste. They also had good ships, powerful weapons, and sophisticated artificial intelligence systems. That was the problem. Both sides were too evenly matched. Jal remembered the lessons from the military academy. He remembered his instructors teaching him about honor in combat, about following the rules of engagement, about fighting wars the civilized way. Both the collective and the Dominion had signed treaties about what weapons could be used, what targets were acceptable, how battles should be conducted. War, they said, was a terrible thing, but it should still follow rules. The battle continued for 6 more hours. The collective destroyed 4 Dominion cruisers. The Dominion destroyed 3 collective destroyers. By the ancient mathematics of war, this meant the collective had won a minor tactical victory. Jal felt no joy. He had won hundreds of minor tactical victories. They meant nothing. Tomorrow or next week or next month, they would fight this same battle again. "All ships begin withdrawal to the rally point," Jal commanded. His fleet pulled back in good order. The Dominion fleet did not pursue. Both sides were exhausted. In his private quarters that night, Jal studied the strategic maps. The warfront had barely moved in 50 years. Systems changed hands occasionally. A planet here, an asteroid belt there. But the overall picture remained the same. 2 great powers locked in eternal struggle, neither able to defeat the other. His communication console beeped. It was a message from High Command. Jal opened it and read the brief text. The message mentioned something about a new species making first contact with the collective. Humans, they were called. They came from a world called Earth in a quiet arm of the galaxy that no one had bothered to explore much. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel. Jal dismissed the information. New species joined the galaxy all the time. Most were primitive and stayed out of major conflicts. Some joined the collective, some joined the Dominion. Most stayed neutral. This war was too big, too old, too complicated for newcomers to understand or affect. He looked at the casualty reports from today's battle. 73 dead on his ship alone. He knew some of their names. Young Krell, who had just transferred from another vessel. Old Maxes, who had served with Jal for 20 years. Dead now, their bodies floating in space or burned to ash in the explosions. For what? For a tactical victory that would be reversed next week? For a war that would outlive his grandchildren? Jal had a secret thought, one he never spoke aloud. He was tired. Not physically tired, though he was that too. He was tired in his soul, tired of fighting, tired of watching friends die, tired of knowing that this war would never end, could never end. because both sides were too strong and too stubborn to surrender. The next morning brought news of another engagement in the Outer Rim. The Dominion had attacked a minor collective outpost. The collective had reinforced and pushed them back. Somewhere, Dominion commanders were reading similar reports about collective attacks on their territory. The great wheel of war turned on and on. Jaal walked through his ship's corridors and saw the faces of his crew. They were professionals, well-trained and disciplined. They did their jobs. But he could see the same exhaustion in their eyes that he felt in his heart. How many more battles? How many more years? How many more friends would die for nothing? In the war room, his officers gathered for the morning briefing. They discussed supply lines, fleet movements, intelligence reports about Dominion activities. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it had been yesterday, and the day before and the day before that. Jaal half listened while his mind wandered. He thought about the ancient history files he had studied. Before the war, his species had been explorers and scientists. They had built beautiful cities and created works of art. Now they built warships and trained soldiers. An entire civilization dedicated to endless conflict. The same was true for all the species in the collective, and probably for the Dominion races too. Commander, Sisk's voice interrupted his thoughts. Your orders for today's patrol? Standard route, Jaal said. Stay alert for Dominion scouts. Same as yesterday, same as yesterday, same as tomorrow, same as forever. The briefing ended and the officers returned to their duties. Jaal stood alone for a moment in the war room, surrounded by maps of a conflict that had no solution. 847 years. How many more? 1,000? 2,000? Would this war still be raging when his species finally went extinct? He straightened his uniform and left the war room. There was work to do. There were always work to do. The war demanded it, the eternal, pointless, unchanging war. Somewhere in the quiet arm of the galaxy, a species called humans had just learned to travel faster than light. Jaal did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. The eternal stalemate was about to end, but not today. Today was just another day in a war that would never end, or so everyone thought. The attack on New Terra came without warning. The human colony had been established for only 5 years, home to 30,000 settlers trying to build a new life on a distant world. They had farms, small factories, schools for their children. They were not soldiers. They were farmers and engineers and teachers. When the Dominion raiding ships appeared in orbit, the colonists had 17 minutes of warning. 17 minutes to decide between death and survival. Many ran to the shelters, but others, several hundred of them, grabbed whatever weapons they had and prepared to fight. Captain Horvath of the Dominion Third Fleet expected easy prey. Intelligence reports said humans were primitive, newly spacefaring with no real military to speak of. This would be a simple raid to gather resources and slaves. His ships descended through the atmosphere and deployed ground forces. What happened next surprised him. The humans fought back with a ferocity that made no logical sense. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing technology superior to their own. Military doctrine said they should surrender. Instead, they used every trick they could think of. They set traps. They used improvised explosives. They turned farming equipment into weapons. A group of colonists lured a Dominion squad into a grain silo and buried them alive in tons of wheat. When a human position became untenable, the defenders did not surrender. They retreated, destroyed everything useful behind them, and set up new positions. A wounded human with a broken leg held a tunnel for an hour with nothing but a hunting rifle, allowing civilians to escape, before finally dying from blood loss and exhaustion. He killed 9 Dominion soldiers in that hour. Horvath eventually won the battle, but it cost him 3 dropships, 47 soldiers, and most of a day. For a primitive colony that should have fallen in an hour, he took fewer prisoners than expected because so many humans chose death over capture. The resources he captured barely covered the cost of the raid. When he reported back to his superiors, Horvath mentioned the unusual resistance. The Dominion commanders noted it and filed it away. One troublesome colony did not mean much. The humans were still insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but the collective had been watching. They had monitoring stations throughout that region of space. They had seen what happened on New Terra. They had seen hundreds of civilians hold off a professional military force for hours longer than they should have. It was impressive in a strange way. High Command decided to make contact. The collective needed allies. Any ally would help, even a primitive one. 3 weeks after the attack, a collective diplomatic ship arrived at Earth orbit. General Sarah Chen led the human delegation. She was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 30 years in the Earth military, fighting in 3 different wars. She knew what war looked like. When the collective showed her the reality of the Galactic War, she watched 847 years of conflict reduced to charts and statistics on a screen. "This is insane," she said finally. The collective ambassador, a tall being named Torvin with blue skin and too many fingers, looked confused. "War is never pleasant, General Chen, but we conduct it according to civilized principles," Torvin said. "We follow the established rules of engagement. We target only military assets. We treat prisoners according to the Galactic Convention. We minimize civilian casualties." Chen studied the tactical maps. She saw the patterns immediately. "You're fighting the same battles over and over. You take a system, they take it back, you take it again. Neither side tries to break the cycle. The cycle, as you call it, is simply the reality of evenly matched forces." Torvin explained patiently. "We do our best within the constraints of civilized warfare. Why haven't you targeted their supply infrastructure deep in their territory? Why haven't you disrupted their command and control? Why are you fighting fleet actions at predictable locations instead of using irregular tactics?" Chen asked. Torvin looked uncomfortable. Such actions would be considered improper. The Galactic Convention specifically limits warfare to designated conflict zones. Attacking deep infrastructure would endanger civilian populations. Irregular tactics are seen as dishonorable. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Ambassador Torvin, with respect, you're not trying to win this war. You're trying to manage it." "We are trying to win while maintaining our principles," Torvin said stiffly. "Principles don't matter if you're dead," Chen replied. "But Earth will join your collective. We need allies, and you seem like the better choice compared to the Dominion. However, I need you to understand something. If we're going to fight, we fight to win. Completely, decisively, and as quickly as possible." Torvin smiled, an expression that looked strange on his alien features. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, General. Your forces will be a welcome addition. However, I should manage your expectations. This is a complex conflict with deep historical roots. One new member species will not dramatically change 8 centuries of stalemate." Chen did not smile back. "You'll see." The alliance was formalized 1 month later. Earth committed 12 fleet groups to the collective cause. It was not a large force by galactic standards, but it was what humanity could spare. The Dominion intercepted the news of Earth joining the collective and analyzed it. Lord Commander Vrath of the Dominion read the intelligence report and laughed. A sound like grinding metal. Humans. A species that had been in space for barely 30 years. A species with primitive ships and simple weapons. The report from Horvath about the colony raid was noted, but Vrath dismissed it. Desperate colonists fighting for their homes meant nothing in real war. "Let the collective have their new pets," Vrath said to his staff. "It will not save them. This war has continued for 847 years. No single species can change that. Certainly not these humans," his officers agreed. The war would continue as it always had. The balance of power would remain. Nothing would change. Back on Earth, Chen stood in a military command center and looked at the star maps. She had a team of analysts working around the clock, studying every battle record the collective had shared, every tactical pattern, every strategic decision. She was looking for weaknesses, for opportunities, for pressure points. One of her analysts, a young lieutenant named Park, approached her. "General, I've compiled the data you requested. The Dominion's logistics network has 17 critical choke points. Their command structure is highly centralized. Their communication systems use encryption we can probably break with enough computing power." Chen nodded slowly. "And the collective's rules of engagement?" "Prohibit most of the tactics we would need to exploit those weaknesses, ma'am." "Then we'll need to change the rules," Chen said quietly. "The collective thinks war is supposed to be civilized. We know better. War is the ultimate breakdown of civilization. When you fight, you don't fight to follow rules. You fight to win." She turned to face her command staff. "We have 6 months before our forces are ready to deploy. 6 months to plan how we're going to end an 800-year-old war. Let's get to work." Outside the command center, Earth continued its preparations. Factories worked overtime building ships and weapons. Soldiers trained for combat in alien environments. Scientists developed new technologies. Humanity was going to war, and they were going to fight it the only way they knew how. The galaxy did not know what was coming. In 6 months, everything would change. The first joint operation was supposed to be simple. A collective fleet would attack a Dominion supply depot in the Carvex system. Human ships would provide support. Commander Jal had been assigned as liaison to the human forces, which meant he had a front-row seat to what he would later call organized chaos. The collective battle plan was thorough and proper. The fleet would jump in at a safe distance, form proper battle formations, demand surrender, then engage if refused. It was how battles had been fought for centuries, clean, professional, civilized. The humans had other ideas. Admiral Zhang, commander of the human task force, listened to the collective plan and then politely ignored most of it. His ships jumped in much closer than safety protocols recommended. Before the Dominion could even respond to surrender demands, human fighters were already streaking toward the depot, laying mines in the approach vectors. "Admiral, you're supposed to wait for their response," Zhal protested from his station on Zhang's flagship. "Commander Zhal, with respect, I'm not here to have a conversation." Zhang replied calmly, "I'm here to destroy that depot. Every minute we wait is a minute they use to call for reinforcements." The Dominion ships moved to intercept, using Standard Defensive Pattern 19. Zhang studied it for exactly 4 seconds and then ordered an attack run that violated 3 different collective tactical doctrines. His ships broke formation, scattered, and came at the Dominion from 6 different angles at once. It looked like suicide. The collective officers on Zhang's bridge watched in horror. Then it worked. The Dominion ships, trained to respond to proper collective tactics, did not know how to react to the chaotic human assault. While they were still trying to coordinate a response, human bombers slipped through their formation and hit the supply depot directly. The depot exploded in a massive fireball that lit up local space. The Dominion commander, shocked at the speed of the attack, ordered a retreat. The human ships let them go, but not before attaching tracking devices to their hulls. Zhang wanted to know where they would run to. The entire battle lasted 14 minutes. The collective had expected it to take 3 hours minimum. Zhal stood on the bridge of Zhang's ship, his forearms hanging limply at his sides, trying to process what he had just witnessed. You lost 2 ships. That's an unacceptable casualty rate for such a minor target, Zhal said finally. We destroyed a major supply depot and scattered an enemy fleet, Zhang countered. 2 ships and 38 lives. I hate that cost. But the depot supplied 15 Dominion battle groups. We just crippled their logistics for this entire sector. That's a worthy trade. You're supposed to minimize casualties, Zhal insisted. The collective way has kept you in a stalemate for 800 years. Zhang interrupted, but not unkindly. Commander, I understand this seems brutal to you, but humans learned something painful over thousands of years of fighting each other. War is not a game. It's not about honor or proper conduct. It's about making the enemy unable and unwilling to continue fighting. We do that by hitting them hard, hitting them fast, and hitting them where it hurts most. Zhal did not respond. He requested a transfer to a different human unit, thinking perhaps Zhang was an unusual case. High Command approved and assigned him to a human special operations group led by a woman named Colonel Martinez. If Zhang had disturbed him, Martinez terrified him. Her unit operated in small teams deep behind enemy lines. They did not fight battles. They sabotaged infrastructure. They spread misinformation. They assassinated key officers. They did things the collective had banned as uncivilized warfare 500 years ago. Zhal watched one mission from the safety of a stealth ship. Martinez's team infiltrated a Dominion fuel processing station. They did not destroy it. Instead, they contaminated the fuel with a chemical that would cause engine failures weeks later. By the time the Dominion realized what had happened, hundreds of their ships would be stranded in space. This is poison warfare, Zhal said, mandibles clicking in agitation. The Galactic Convention forbids. We didn't poison people. We poisoned fuel, Martinez said. She was cleaning her rifle as she spoke, her hands moving with practiced ease. Big difference. And the convention is a lovely idea, but it only works if both sides follow it. The Dominion attacked our colony and killed civilians. That means the gloves come off. But you are becoming like them. You lower yourself to— No, Martinez interrupted sharply. We're becoming what we need to be to win. There's a difference between using brutal tactics to end a war quickly and being brutal for the sake of it. Every day this war continues, thousands die. If I can end it faster by doing things that make you uncomfortable, I'll do those things, because the alternative is 800 more years of death. Jal spent a month with Martinez's unit. He watched them operate with a creativity and ruthlessness that seemed impossible. They turned Dominion security measures against the Dominion. They hacked into communication networks and sent false orders. They created rumors and propaganda that spread fear and doubt. They were everywhere and nowhere, striking at random targets so the Dominion never knew where to defend. One night, unable to sleep, Jal found Martinez in the ship's small galley. She was drinking something called coffee, a human stimulant that smelled terrible. "Why do you fight this way?" Jal asked. "Your species is young. You could have joined the galaxy with clean hands. Instead, you bring these dark tactics with you." Martinez was quiet for a moment, staring into her cup. "Commander, my species has fought wars since before we had written language. Tribe against tribe, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We've nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. We know what war really is. Not this sanitized version the collective practices." She looked up at him. "In our history, we had a war that lasted 30 years and killed 8 million people. We had another that lasted 100 years. We had wars that killed 50 million, 60 million. We learned that if you're going to fight a war, you end it as fast as possible. You use every advantage you have. You make the enemy unable to continue, because a long war is a lost war even if you win eventually. But the principles, the honor," Jal said weakly. "There's no honor in 800 years of pointless death," Martinez replied. "The collective and Dominion have been so concerned with fighting honorably that you forgot to actually end the war. You've turned conflict into a permanent state of being. That's not honorable. That's just wasteful." Jal returned to his ship 3 days later. He filed his reports with High Command, trying to explain what he had seen. The human way of war was effective, yes, but it was also disturbing. They fought without restraint, without following the established rules, without concern for how they would be judged by history. But they won. In every operation, in every engagement, the humans achieved their objectives, and they did it fast. High Command read his reports with growing concern. Some argued that the humans should be restrained, forced to follow collective doctrine. Others pointed out that human forces had accomplished more in 3 months than the collective had in 3 years. The debate raged in council chambers while the humans continued their campaign. Meanwhile, deep in Dominion space, supply convoys were disappearing. Communication networks were failing. Officers were dying in their sleep. The Dominion High Command did not understand what was happening. They were losing a war of attrition to an enemy they could not see or predict, Lord. Commander Vrath studied the reports and felt something he had not felt in decades, fear. The humans were not fighting like any species he had encountered. They did not challenge the Dominion to honorable combat. They were like a disease spreading through Dominion space, weakening everything they touched. "Find them," Vrath ordered. "Find these humans and destroy them." But finding an enemy who refused to fight fair was harder than anyone expected. The humans were rewriting the rules of warfare, and the galaxy was not ready for it. 6 months after humanity entered the war, Lord Commander Vrath stood in his command center and stared at a map that no longer made sense. Red marks indicated lost facilities. Yellow marks showed compromised systems. Blue marks represented units that had missed their last check-in. There was too much red, too much yellow, far too much blue. "Explain to me how the humans are doing this," Vrath demanded. His voice was quiet, which his staff knew meant he was truly angry. "They have 12 fleet groups, 12, we have 300. Yet they are everywhere at once. They strike deep into our territory at targets that should be impossible to reach." His intelligence officer, a scarred veteran named Kresh, pulled up another display. "They use stealth technology we never developed. Our sensors are calibrated to detect ships using standard drives and shields. Human ships use different technology, quieter, harder to track." "Then recalibrate the sensors," Vrath said. "We are trying, Lord Commander. But every time we adjust, they adjust. It's like they know what we're looking for and change their methods specifically to avoid it." They did know. In a base 3 systems away, a human signals intelligence team was intercepting every Dominion communication. The Dominion encryption was sophisticated, built on mathematical principles that should have been unbreakable. But human cryptographers approached the problem differently than any AI had. They looked for patterns, for mistakes, for psychological tells in how operators used the codes. Within 4 months, humans were reading Dominion communications almost in real time. Lieutenant Park, who had been with Chen's team from the beginning, explained it to Zhal during one of the commander's visits to human operations. The Dominion and the Collective, too, rely heavily on artificial intelligence for warfare. AI is very good at what it does, but AI thinks logically, predictably. Humans don't always think logically. We make intuitive leaps. We see connections that shouldn't exist. We approach problems sideways. You're saying human logic is a military advantage? Zhal asked, finding the idea disturbing. Sometimes the best solution is not the logical one, Park replied with a smile. The war continued to shift. Dominion fleets found themselves constantly reacting, never able to take initiative. Human forces seemed to know where Dominion ships would be before they arrived. Ambushes destroyed convoy after convoy. Officers disappeared from secure facilities, found dead days later with no evidence of how the killers entered or left. The Dominion tried to retaliate by attacking human positions, but finding those positions proved nearly impossible. Human bases were small, mobile, and hidden. By the time Dominion forces arrived at a supposed human stronghold, they found nothing but empty space and sometimes mines that had been left specifically for them. General Chen stood in her command center and watched the war map with satisfaction. We're not fighting their war anymore. We're making them fight ours. But it was not just military action that was breaking the Dominion. Human psychological warfare specialists had been studying Dominion culture for months. They understood the fault lines in the Empire, the tensions between the ruling caste and the subject species. They began to exploit those divisions. Radio broadcasts in a dozen languages flooded Dominion space. The messages were simple. You don't have to die for the sovereign caste. The war is lost. Surrender now and live. Continue fighting and burn with them. The broadcasts mixed truth with carefully crafted lies, creating confusion and doubt. Saboteurs spread rumors of defeats, of the sovereign caste preparing to flee, of subject species planning rebellions. Most rumors were false, but some were true, and the Dominion could not tell the difference. Trust began to erode. Officers suspected their subordinates. Soldiers suspected their officers. The fear of infiltration became as damaging as actual infiltration. On the planet Draxor Prime, a major Dominion industrial world, workers went on strike. They had heard the human broadcasts. They had seen supply shipments fail to arrive. They had heard that the war was going badly. Why should they work themselves to death for a losing cause? Dominion security forces moved to crush the strike, but that only sparked riots. Within a week, Draxor Prime was in chaos. Similar unrest spread to 6 other worlds. The Dominion military, stretched thin fighting humans on a dozen fronts, did not have enough troops to maintain order everywhere. They had to choose between fighting the external enemy and suppressing internal dissent. Either choice weakened them. Zhal watched all of this and felt a cold understanding settle into his mind. The humans were not just fighting a military campaign. They were dismantling the Dominion from every angle at once. Military, economic, political, social, psychological. It was comprehensive in a way that seemed almost cruel. He said as much to Colonel Martinez during another meeting. You are destroying an entire civilization. No, Martinez corrected. We're destroying a government and a military. There's a difference. The Dominion people will survive. They might even thank us eventually when they're not living under an authoritarian empire anymore. The Collective has never fought this way. We target military assets, not civilian morale. We don't spread propaganda and lies. You also haven't won in 800 years, Martinez pointed out. War is not just about battles, Commander. It's about will. If we can break their will to fight, they'll surrender without us having to kill them all. Isn't that better than another century of fleet battles? Zhal had no answer to that. Logically, she was right. Fewer would die if the war ended quickly, but it still felt wrong somehow. Too efficient, too ruthless. The 8th month of human involvement brought the first Dominion attempts at negotiation. Secret envoys approached Collective diplomats asking about terms for a ceasefire. The Collective was ready to negotiate, eager to end the long war. General Chen shut down the negotiations immediately. No, she said flatly at the Joint Command meeting. No ceasefire. No negotiation. Not yet. General, they're offering to discuss terms, The collective High Chancellor said. We could end this. They're offering to discuss terms because they're losing and need time to regroup, Chen countered. If we stop now, they'll rebuild and we'll be right back where we started. The only acceptable outcome is unconditional surrender. The collective representatives were shocked. Unconditional surrender had not been demanded in galactic conflicts for over 1,000 years. It was considered unnecessarily harsh. You want to humiliate them? The Chancellor asked. I want to make sure this war actually ends, Chen replied. Not pause. Not freeze. End. The Dominion attacked our colonies without provocation. They've killed millions of your people over 8 centuries. They don't get to negotiate their way out when they start losing. She stood and faced the assembled collective leadership. You asked for our help. You got it. But we're doing this our way. The war ends when the Dominion government collapses and their military surrenders. Not before. The collective had no choice but to agree. They needed the humans. Without them, the stalemate would return. So the war continued, and the pressure on the Dominion increased. Vrath knew the end was coming. His fleets were scattered and demoralized. His supply lines were broken. His subject species were in revolt. His own officers were beginning to question whether continuing the war made any sense. The humans had done in 8 months what the collective could not do in 800 years. They had made the Dominion believe they could not win. How did your species learn to fight like this? Vrath asked during a rare captured human interrogation. The human pilot, a young woman with captain's insignia, smiled despite her injuries. We practiced on each other for 10,000 years, she said. Every terrible thing you can imagine doing in a war, we did it to ourselves first. We learned from all that pain. We learned how to win. Vrath ordered her taken away and returned to his maps. The humans were monsters, he thought. Efficient, effective monsters who fought without mercy or honor. But they were winning. That was the terrifying part. Everything they did, as brutal as it seemed, was working. The 9th month brought the collapse of 3 major Dominion sectors. The 10th month saw the assassination of 5 members of the sovereign caste. By the 11th month, Dominion military command was barely functioning. Officers were surrendering whole units without authorization. Planets were declaring independence. The Empire was eating itself from the inside, and still the humans pushed forward, relentless as a natural force. They never stopped, never slowed, never gave the Dominion a chance to recover. Jal finally understood what Martinez had meant. Humans were persistence hunters. They chased their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The Dominion was exhausted. 18 months after humanity joined the war, Lord Commander Vrath sent a message to the collective high command. It was a simple message, only 3 words long in the common galactic language. We surrender, unconditionally. Commander Jal heard the news in his quarters aboard his ship. He had been reading casualty reports as he did every evening. The same ritual he had performed for over a century. When the announcement came through, he thought it was a mistake. A communications error. Some kind of trick, but it was real. The Dominion, an empire that had fought for 847 years, had collapsed in less than 2 years. Not just lost a battle or a campaign, collapsed. The sovereign caste was dead or in hiding. The military was surrendering fleet by fleet. Subject species across Dominion space were declaring independence or joining the collective. It was over. The war was over. Jal sat in his quarters and tried to process that thought. Over. A concept that had seemed impossible for his entire life. He had never known a day of peace. None of his species had. The war had been a constant, like gravity or time. Now it was just gone. The surrender ceremonies took 3 weeks to organize. There were so many Dominion military units to process, so many territories to secure, so many details to work out. The Collective Council wanted to hold the main ceremony at their capital, but General Chen insisted it take place at New Terra, the human colony that had been attacked. Where this had all started, Jal attended as part of the collective delegation. He found himself standing in a large hall that still showed signs of damage from the Dominion raid, 18 months earlier. Scorch marks on the walls, repaired sections of floor. It was deliberate, he realized. The humans wanted everyone to remember how this began. General Chen stood at the front of the hall in her dress uniform. She looked tired. They all looked tired. Beside her stood Admiral Zhang, Colonel Martinez, and dozens of other human officers. Behind them stood the collective leadership, looking somewhat uncomfortable. This was a human show and everyone knew it. The Dominion representatives entered. There were only 5 of them, the remnants of the sovereign caste, their proud armor stripped away, wearing simple gray uniforms. They looked small somehow, diminished. Behind them came 20 Dominion military officers representing the fleets and armies that had once seemed invincible. The ceremony was brief. Chen spoke for 10 minutes about the cost of war, the importance of peace, and the hope for a better future. Then the Dominion representatives signed the surrender documents. No negotiations, no conditions, just surrender. It was over in 30 minutes. Afterward, Zhao found himself in a smaller room where a reception was being held. It felt strange to stand in the same room as former enemies, drinking and making small talk. He saw Chen standing alone by a window, looking out at the rebuilt colony. He approached her. "General Chen," he said. I'm not sure what I wanted to say." Chen turned and gave him a tired smile. "It's okay, Commander. I know this has been difficult for you. Watching how we fight, I read your reports. How did you do it?" Zhao asked. "How did your species end an 800-year war in 18 months? Chen was quiet for a moment, looking back out the window. "You and the Dominion were fighting by the same rules. You thought war was a chess match between civilized powers, a contest with honor and proper conduct. But that's not what war is, Commander. War is the complete breakdown of civilization. It's what happens when talking fails and violence becomes the only language." She turned to face him fully. "Humans learned that lesson the hard way. We fought each other for thousands of years. We tried honorable war, chivalrous war, limited war. And you know what we learned? War doesn't care about honor. War doesn't stop because you follow rules. War only ends when one side can't or won't continue fighting." "So you fight without honor?" Zhao asked. "No, we fight to win as quickly as possible. Every day a war continues is a failure. Every week more people die for nothing. The collective and Dominion were so concerned with fighting properly that you forgot the goal was to end the fighting." Chen's voice was firm but not unkind. "You turned warfare into a permanent institution. We came in and reminded everyone that wars are supposed to end. But the things your forces did, the sabotage, the assassinations, the psychological warfare, it was brutal." "Yes, it was," Chen agreed. "War is brutal. We don't pretend otherwise. But here's the question, Commander. Would you rather have 800 more years of proper civilized warfare, or 18 months of brutal, ugly warfare that actually ends? How many more of your friends would have died in those 800 years? Zhao had no answer. He thought of all the comrades he had lost over his century of fighting. He thought of the generations that had been born and died knowing only war. Chen was right, and he hated that she was right. "Your species frightens me," Zhao said quietly. "We frighten ourselves sometimes," Chen replied. "That's why we try so hard to avoid war now. We know what we're capable of. We know what we become when we fight. That's why we spent 30 years exploring peacefully before this conflict. We hoped we were done with war." "But you're not done with it," Zhao observed. "No species is ever done with war, Commander. We just try to be better about when and how we fight. And when we do fight, we fight to win and end it quickly. Because the alternative is," she gestured around, 800 years of death. Over the following weeks, the galaxy adjusted to peace. It was a strange adjustment for everyone. Entire civilizations had to figure out what to do now that war was not the center of their existence. The collective had to absorb dozens of former Dominion species. Former enemies had to learn to be neighbors. The human fleets began withdrawing back toward Earth space. Their work was done. They had no interest in occupation or conquest. They had entered the war to defend their colonies and help an ally. Now the war was over and they could go home. Zhao requested permission to visit Earth before the humans left. He wanted to understand these strange, frightening, efficient people better. General Chen approved his request and gave him a tour of the human homeworld. Earth was beautiful in a wild way. Diverse ecosystems, towering cities, ancient monuments to countless cultures. But what struck Zhao most were the war memorials. There were so many of them. Every city seemed to have monuments to various conflicts. Fields of graves, walls with millions of names carved into them. "Your species builds monuments to remember war," Zhao observed as they stood before a memorial wall. "We build them so we don't forget," Chen said. "Every name on these walls represents someone who died fighting. We don't want to forget what war costs. We don't want to forget why we should avoid it. Yet you're so good at it. Because we had to be. Because we did it to ourselves for so long. We nearly destroyed our species a dozen times, Commander. We built weapons that could sterilize our planet. We fought wars that killed millions, and finally we learned war should be a last resort, but if it becomes necessary, you don't drag it out. You don't make it a permanent state of being. You end it as fast as possible and get back to peace. They walked through the memorial garden. Chen continued, "You know what the real tragedy is? The Collective and Dominion could have ended their wars centuries ago. Either side could have pushed for total victory instead of endless stalemate. But you were both too concerned with fighting the right way. So the war became self-perpetuating, a machine that fed on lives and resources for its own sake." "And you broke the machine," Zhal said. "We destroyed it," Chen corrected. "We came in and showed both sides that the war could end, that it should end. We just happened to be on the Collective's side, so the Dominion collapsed first." Zhal felt a chill run through his body. "What if you had joined the Dominion instead?" Chen smiled, but it was not a happy expression. Then this conversation would be happening on the Dominion capital, and the Collective would have surrendered. "We didn't care who we fought for, Commander. We cared about ending the war. That's terrifying." "Yes," Chen agreed. "It should be. That's why the galaxy needs to understand something very clearly now. Humans don't want to fight. We've seen enough war to last 1,000 lifetimes. But if you force us to fight, we will win. Quickly, completely, without hesitation." She looked at him seriously. "That's the message we're leaving the galaxy with. Don't start wars. Don't attack human colonies. Don't make us come back. Because if we do, it won't be to fight by your rules. It will be to end things our way." Zhal returned to his ship the next day. He filed his final report about humanity and their methods. He included everything he had learned, everything he had seen, everything that had disturbed and impressed him. He ended the report with a simple recommendation. Maintain peaceful relations with humanity at all costs. Never give them a reason to return to war. The Collective and former Dominion species took that recommendation seriously. In the years that followed, human colonies were left alone. Human ships were treated with respect. When disputes arose, they were handled diplomatically and quickly. No one wanted to anger the species that had ended an 800-year war in 18 months. Peace lasted. The galaxy remembered, and humanity returned to their quiet corner of space, hoping they would never have to fight again, but ready if they must.